The first night, it was the lights. We just finished roasting marshmallows, that sleepy golden haze settling over the campground, the hum of RV generators, the laughter from a neighbouring site, the faint twang of a guitar somewhere down the loop. My sister and her husband had rented one of those big fifth-wheel rigs with air conditioning and a little porch light that flicked on when someone walked past. Except it wouldn't stay off. Even after we'd all turned in, I saw it blink on through the curtains once, twice, then steady again. Probably motion sensors misfiring, I figured. The place was full, kids running late to the bathrooms, folks walking dogs, but still it gave me an odd feeling, like the light had noticed us. We were at Clearwater Pines, one of those modern campgrounds where the bathrooms are cleaner than most gas stations, with real showers and a snack shop that sold firewood and soft serve. Not exactly roughing it, but we liked it. There was a lake with paddle boats and a playground shaped like a pirate ship. My niece and nephew had been running circles around the loop all afternoon, squealing with the kind of joy only sugar and summer can produce. The air smelled like sunscreen, charcoal and pine needles, civilized wilderness. The next morning, my brother-in-law joked about hearing someone crying in the night. Must have been a kid who lost a stuffed animal, he said, but when we asked around, neighbours, the camp hosts, no one else had heard it. He laughed it off, but his wife looked uneasy. Later, when we went out to the lake, she mentioned she'd had a dream about water, dark water, and voices under it. I teased her about campfire ghost stories, but she didn't smile. By the second night, the weirdness had spread. The lantern on our picnic table kept dimming and brightening like a heartbeat. My niece's inflatable unicorn drifted across the grass on its own, though there wasn't a hint of breeze. The kids said someone had been whistling near the bathrooms, an old tune they couldn't name. When my brother-in-law checked, the stalls were empty and the lights flickered overhead. Still, it was easier to joke than to worry. Bad wiring, he said. Too many campers on the grid. We told ourselves that. Even as the air grew heavy with that faint scent of something metallic, almost like old machinery after rain. Even as the campground, so alive with chatter earlier, seemed to hush all at once when the sun went down. That night, as I lay in the camper bunk, I swore I heard boots crunching gravel outside, slow and deliberate. And then, from somewhere beyond the trees, came the distant sound of a hammer striking wood, steady, rhythmic, like work continuing long after dark. The next morning, everything looked harmless again. Dew sparkling on the picnic tables, coffee brewing from half the campsites around us, the air rich with bacon and maple syrup. It's funny how daylight makes you doubt your own senses. My brother-in-law joked that I'd been dreaming about ghost carpenters, but when I mentioned the hammering, he admitted he'd heard something too, like metal striking wood, faint but steady. We decided maybe someone was doing late-night repairs on their trailer. Logical enough. Still, there was a charge in the air, something just beneath ordinary life. When I walked the loop to the general store for ice, I noticed a few campers glancing around the way you do when you feel watched. One woman muttered that her TV kept turning itself on. A kid pointed to the woods behind our sites and said, "That's where they live." His mum hushed him before I could ask what he meant. That afternoon, the ranger came by in his golf cart, cheerful and chatty. My sister asked if the campground had ever had electrical issues. "Not lately," he said. "New wiring, new hookups. This used to be the old mill grounds, had to replace everything when they built the park." I caught that phrase, old mill grounds, and asked what kind of mill. "Lumber," he said. This whole valley was a logging operation 100 years ago. Pretty big outfit back in its day. Some stories say it was more like a company town, sawmill, bunkhouses, even a little infirmary. Nothing left but some foundations buried under the East Loop. He said it casually, like a tour guide talking about local trivia, but it landed in me like a small, cold pebble. That evening, as the sun sank and the air cooled, I took a walk alone toward that East Loop. Families were grilling, laughter echoing through the pines. The modern world was alive all around, LED porch lights, Bluetooth speakers, shiny SUVs, and yet under it all was a hush, an old quiet. Near the edge of the woods, I saw the ground dip slightly, weeds growing in perfect rectangles. Stone corners poked through the soil. Maybe the remains of those bunkhouses. I could almost imagine the thud of axes, the grind of saws, the sweat and danger of it. When I returned to camp, my sister's little boy was crying. His toy truck, the one he'd left on the picnic table, was gone. We searched everywhere until he pointed toward the edge of the trees. There it was, halfway buried in the dirt, tire tracks leading nowhere. We stared at it in silence. My brother-in-law said softly, "That's not funny," though no one had been laughing. That night, the lights didn't flicker. They stayed off entirely, every single one across the campground, as if something had reached up from the ground and pulled the power down into the dark. At first, we thought it was a blackout. Happens sometimes. Too many RVs running air conditioners, everyone charging phones and plugging in coffee makers. But this time, the quiet that followed wasn't normal. It wasn't the comfortable hush after the hum fades. It was thick, watchful, the kind of silence that feels like it's listening back. Somewhere, a baby cried, muffled by canvas. A man's voice called out, "Everything out on your end," and another answered, "Yeah." But even those words sounded swallowed, as if the trees were leaning closer to hear. We lit our lanterns, the old propane kind that hissed and glowed with that warm, steady halo. My sister tried to keep things light, joking that at least the kids would get a real camping experience now. But her hands were trembling. My nephew tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "They're mad!" I crouched down and asked who he meant, but he just pointed toward the dark line of the woods and wouldn't say another word. Then came the sound again, the hammering. Slow, steady and distant, but clear, as if carried through the roots of the earth. 3 strikes. A pause. Then another 3. My brother-in-law grabbed a flashlight and muttered something about some idiot playing around. I followed him a few steps down the gravel lane, but the light from our lamps barely touched the road ahead. You could see where the beam hit the dust, but beyond that, only blackness. And then, in that blackness, something moved. A shadow? A person? We couldn't tell. It crossed the light for just a heartbeat, but I swear it was hunched, carrying something over its shoulder, something that looked like an axe handle glinting in the lantern glow. We froze. The figure disappeared behind a stand of pines, and the hammering stopped. Back at camp, the kids were huddled together in the camper whispering about voices outside the window. My sister said she'd heard someone walking around the fire pit while we were gone. We checked for footprints, but the gravel was smooth, undisturbed, except for our own. The wind started up then, rattling the awning and making the trees shiver. Still no lights from the other campsites, though here and there, lanterns flickered like distant ships on a dark sea. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shape crossing the road, heavy and deliberate. Around midnight, I heard something new, a faint, rhythmic creak, like a chain being pulled through wet pulleys. I thought of the logging mill, of machines grinding wood into planks, of men working by lantern light, long before any of us camped here for fun. Somewhere deep in the trees, a voice called out. One word, drawn out and aching, as if from another time entirely. I couldn't tell if it was my name or someone else's, but it sounded human and it sounded lost. By dawn, the power was back. The hum of generators and the scent of breakfast returned like nothing had happened. The ranger came by again, cheerful as ever, claiming a blown transformer was to blame. He must have noticed our pale faces though, because he added, "Happens every few years, nothing spooky about it." Then he winked and drove off down the loop, leaving a trail of dust and diesel fumes, but something had changed. The campground felt wrong. The air was too still, the sunlight too thin, as if the world hadn't completely decided to be daytime yet. While the kids rode their bikes, my sister wandered off toward the trees, saying she wanted to check for that old foundation I'd mentioned. I followed her, more out of unease than curiosity. The path curved through ferns and low pines, the air cool and damp. That metallic smell lingered again, old tools, rust, something left behind by men who'd worked too hard and died too young. We found what looked like the remains of a wall, stones neatly stacked, moss creeping over them. A bit farther on, something metal jutted from the ground, maybe part of a boiler or press. Nearby, half buried in the dirt, lay a rusted saw blade the size of a wagon wheel. It shimmered faintly in the dappled light. My sister knelt beside it, tracing her fingers through the rust. "Imagine all the noise this place must have made," she whispered. "All that work, all that life." That's when we heard it again, the creaking chain. Not distant this time, but close, threading through the trees like a whisper. I felt it before I heard it, a faint vibration in the soles of my boots. Then came the rhythmic thump of wood on wood, the groan of an unseen beam. My sister's eyes met mine, wide and wet. "Let's go," she said, but as we turned back toward camp, we both stopped dead. Across the clearing, standing among the shadows, was a figure. He wasn't transparent or glowing, nothing like that, just out of place. A man in heavy clothes, shoulders hunched, face lost in shadow beneath a brimmed hat. He stood motionless beside the old foundation, staring at us. The chain sound stopped. For a moment, all we could hear was the birds, bright, normal, living birds, and then even they went silent. I blinked, and he was gone. Not vanished into thin air exactly, more like he'd stepped backward and let the forest swallow him. We didn't speak on the walk back, just hurried past the other campsites where kids laughed and dogs barked. Life went on, ordinary as ever, but that smell of iron and sawdust followed us, faint but persistent. That night, I dreamed of lanterns swinging in the dark, of men's shadows bending over benches, of the river thick with logs drifting toward an unseen mill, and through it all, the slow beat of a hammer, steady as a pulse, echoing through time. We packed up the next morning under a thin grey sky. The air was cool, still smelling faintly of rain that hadn't yet come. The campground looked normal again. Kids chasing frisbees, someone grilling breakfast sausage, a radio playing faint country music, but we all moved quietly, avoiding the edge of the woods. No one wanted to talk about what we'd seen. My sister's kids didn't even argue about leaving, which was unusual enough to make my stomach twist. While I coiled the hose and checked the hitch, an older man from the next site wandered over. He had one of those veterans caps, his weathered face friendly but serious. "You folks heading out early?" he asked. I nodded. He looked toward the trees and said, "Can't say I blame you. My wife and I used to come here every summer before they paved everything over." He hesitated, as though weighing how much to say. "This used to be the bunkhouse field. Loggers lived right where those RVs are parked. A bad fire took the whole thing, killed a dozen men, maybe more. Folks say the mill ran day and night, and the men slept in shifts. When it burned, half of them never woke up." He didn't sound like he was telling a ghost story, just relaying a fact. He rubbed his thumb along the brim of his cap and added softly, "Sometimes, when the wind's right, you can still hear the saws." We left soon after. The kids were restless in the back seat, the kind of silence that means they're thinking, but don't want to talk. My sister sat beside me, eyes on the road, her hands gripping her coffee like an anchor. She finally said, "You know that man we saw. I think he was just trying to finish something. Maybe he didn't know the day was done." I didn't answer, but her words lingered. By the time we reached the highway, the clouds broke apart, sunlight spilling through in long, bright spears. The world looked freshly washed. I told myself that's all it was, an overactive imagination, a strange night in an unfamiliar place. Yet even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear that slow rhythm, hammer, pause, hammer, like the earth itself remembering. Some places, I've come to think, don't belong fully to nature or to us. They're caught in between, layers of human life pressed into the soil, waiting for someone to listen. At Clearwater Pines, the forest doesn't whisper about wild things. It hums with the echoes of work, of loss, of hands that shaped the land and never quite let go. And sometimes, when I drive past a sawmill or hear the clink of tools in the distance, I swear the air thickens just a little, as though something unseen is still there, still building, still remembering, still alive beneath the campfire smoke.